Hi there, Nigel here from lawfulrebel.com. I wanted to share with you an aspect of decision making which became clear to me recently in a conversation with a young woman, a young mother-to-be. And this experience of mine really illustrated an important point that I'd like to share. So this young mother was trying to decide whether or not to subject her newborn infant to a particular medical treatment that allegedly provides immunization. It's a sort of a, program of ongoing sub-treatments that accumulate that and allegedly protect youngsters. Now, there's a great deal of debate about this. The mainstream view, of course, is that that particular treatment is absolutely essential and that everyone does it, and of course you should do it. But I would like to illustrate a method that you can use, or a part of a method that you can use to better arrive at your own independently sort of and rationally canvassed view, having sort of got all the information. So this young lady had decided that she couldn't possibly know what to do herself, so she wanted to canvass some another opinion, which is very reasonable. We always have to delegate to authority. This is a reasonable strategy in our truth seeking, but it's not the whole picture. So she went to see a medical friend, a friend of hers who has medical knowledge, and thus she concluded he will know, and I'll be able to go along with what he says. He is in the know. I can trust him. But the point, one of the points I want to make here is that the only way to be sure that you've heard all of the arguments for and against any particular course of action is to actually go out and find out what all those arguments are yourself. It's very dangerous to assume that any particular advice that you may get from any one source has already taken into account all of the factors, all of the arguments for and against. So, this is why if we might take our car to a few different experts, if we hear that it's got something fundamentally wrong with it, or we might want to visit several doctors to get several different ideas of diagnosis. For example, this is just. But the key fundamental principle is that you must never assume that any particular source of information you're going to in your seeking of advice, never assume that they are fully versant with all of the arguments for and against, right? The only way to be sure of that is for you to go out and find out these arguments. You can then raise them, of course, with other with experts and with various people who may advise you on any issue, but you must canvass, I think, the main points for and against, and you'll see what I mean in this example. So it's not that hard to do. It does take effort. It does take sort of mental legwork, if you like. You've got to spend time finding out what these arguments are. And ultimately, you will have to sort of delegate authority to all the different people who are conversant with these arguments and sort of gather them. So there's always an element of delegation to authorities. It's perfectly reasonable as long as you don't do it sort of across the board, carte blanche sort of thing, all in one swoop. So as you're identifying the different arguments, we need to be really precise in in setting out in note form or whatever the benefits and the costs of each particular course of action. So there are a number of things you have to do here. You have to be clear and distinguish between empty claims and assertions and people just telling you must do this, and people actually presenting an argument, a reason that you must do it. You have to distinguish between your feelings being pulled and fact-based conclusions being offered to you. You have to think logically, and you must be aware of logical fallacies. And above all, you've got to have an immense respect for the facts. So what we're going to head towards is ultimately creating 4 different categories. So we're going to write down and categorize all of the positive reasons to have this particular treatment in this case. Reasons why it's a good idea. And then we're going to categorize all of the costs or the negatives of having that treatment, why it's not a good idea to have that treatment. Then, third category, we're going to list all of the positives of not having that treatment. And then lastly, we're going to list all of the negatives of not having that treatment. So you're going to end up with these 4 categories, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is very important to lay out all of the information. So you've got to consult your doctor, of course, go and consult the mainstream, consult all of the conventional views. But you will also have to complete that picture, you're also going to have to consult the naysayers. You're going to have to consult the alternative community, the integrative medicine advocates, the functional medicine practitioners. And you're going to have to hear the best case for all points of view. And you're even going to have to seek out conspiracy theorists. Yes, you are. You have to do this because you've got to evaluate whether or not they have an argument. Because if you just block your ears to it and ignore what they're saying, you could be missing a gem of information. That would be irrational to do that. You must at least give them an ear and find out, have they got an argument? So consult the conspiracy theorists who will say, oh no, you must never do that, blah, blah, blah. And you must approach that claim with, well, why? Why mustn't I? And if you hear reasons why, you must write them down. You must note them. You must clock the reasons, because as always, as I always say, it's the argument that will persuade you. It's not a personality. It's not a pull on your emotions. It's not about being scared of something and rushing to judgment. It's about what are the rational arguments in these 4 categories. Reasons to have it, or positives to have it, negatives to have it, positives not having it, and negatives not having it. So you must seek out all of the arguments, no matter where they come from. This is your work, and in this particular example of the young mother evaluating whether or not to have this treatment for her newborn child, which is a really, really big deal. It doesn't get much bigger. It doesn't get much bigger than evaluating whether to have these kind of treatments for your child. It's a life you're considering. So this work, I would suggest, is entirely worth doing. It's essential to do if you take parental responsibilities seriously. When you are examining your 4 categories, you need to weigh the competing arguments for logical consistency with themselves, logical consistency within that argument, of course, and with all of your other contextual knowledge, all the other things that you know. And as a truth seeker, you'll be continually acquiring more and more knowledge. Hopefully, as a functional human being, you're doing that. But of course, most people don't do that. It's only truth seekers. We've been squeezed into this subset of our culture, sort of. But anyway, this is what you should be doing. Always gathering information and checking it all new arriving information against some of your knowledge and the information you already hold, and the convictions you hold, things you've already discovered to be true, and you're always checking for consistency, because one of your fundamental principles as a truth seeker, as a functional human being, is the law of non-contradiction. Contradictions don't exist in reality, of course. So if we see them out there in recommendations and advice in the world at large, if someone's saying this and somebody else saying the opposite, obviously they can't both be right. At least one of them is wrong. So another thing to check in your considerations is long-term implications. You must think long-term. It's not particularly fashionable to do this, but it's essential. The rational thinker always thinks long-term. What are the long-term implications? I'm not necessarily concerned with what's going to happen next week or next month. What's going to happen in 10 years? What's going to happen in 30 years? Also, try to think in principles. This is really important. Evaluate risk. Also ask yourself, do the arguments get to the fundamentals? And if they don't, if you're asking your doctor about this treatment and he just keeps asserting that you should do this and everyone does this and this is, we do this and we do, always ask why. That's your best question is why. Why do we do that? And keep drilling down with that question until you get a satisfactory answer. So there are a couple of things also to note here. Bias. This particular technique of finding all of the pros to do, the pros to have a treatment and to not have it, and the cons of to have a treatment and not having it, is that it helps you avoid bias. You're deliberately visiting all areas of possibility, if you like. So on the subject of bias, don't seek out unbiased sources. This is a common fallacy. If you want to canvass somebody that says you should do this for this reason, find the person who's biased on that and they will be very pro all their reasons. Of course, that's not the sum total of our consideration, but in terms of considering why you should do this, you want to hear all of those arguments, and then find somebody who's biased in the other direction and get their best arguments. And then it's a question of weighing the logical merit and consistency of one side against the other. So at the risk of repetition, people often say, oh, you should get your news sources from an unbiased source. You should go to an unbiased source, rather, to get your news. And they might allege that the BBC is that unbiased source, or they claim to be. But of course, that's very dangerous. It sort of ends up with somebody sort of fence sitting, and they're claiming to be unbiased, but how do you know? So the best course of action, I would suggest, is to forget that and go for somebody who's absolutely heads down this course of action and weigh up their arguments against somebody who's absolutely convinced that this is the best argument. And again, your intellectual work is to weigh up the merit of these arguments against each other. It's a proactive process that takes effort. So this young mother, in finding out this work of should I subject my newborn infant to this treatment or not, she has to be proactive. She has to put that effort in. I guess I've kind of said that already. And there's another point I just wanted to ram home as well. It's really important to find out what the opponents say. So if everybody says this, if the whole mainstream of the river is pushing you in this direction towards that choice, it's really important for you to deliberately seek out what the opponents to that course of action think and what they say, and why. Why do they say that on each and every issue? It's the only way you're really going to find out the truth. And kind of lastly, I just want to remind you that your guiding principle, and this can't be overstated, is the law of non-contradiction. Basically, in its essence, a thing can't be what it is and not what it is at the same time. We all grasp that. You can't be hot and cold at the same time. I can't be here and somewhere else at the same time. And the fundamental law of non-contradiction is the thinker and the rational. It's the first principle of rational thinking, basically. We have to eliminate contradictions because they don't exist in reality, and our knowledge, the conceptual identification of various aspects of reality, our purpose of that is to act in accordance with the reality, and so our mental map, our knowledge, must correlate with reality. So it must not have any contradictions, just like the real world out there. And when we're trying to decide what course of action to take, in terms of do we give a young infant this particular treatment or not, we absolutely have to be thorough. The opinions don't come into it. Okay? This is not a matter of opinion. Opinions are for favourite colour schemes and various kinds of music and what sort of car you like and hobbies. That's the realm of opinions. This is into the realm of facts. Okay, there's no room for opinions. There is a right and a wrong answer in terms of this kind of issue. So I do hope this has helped. Do check out the website lawfulrebel.com. Perhaps sign up to my newsletter, and do check us out on the podcast, Living Outside the Matrix. But thanks very much for listening, for watching. Hit the like button if you got something from this, and catch us next time.
Change you want to see.